All right, everybody, we're back for another episode. I'm actually not sure which channel I'm publishing on. This is probably going to be on the Untitled podcast. But regardless, I'm talking with a really good friend today. Her name is Nada. We met. I'm actually not sure how we met. It was somewhere on Instagram. She probably just peeped. I peeped. She was a real one. She peeped. I was a real one. You know, it's a lot of craziness on the internet these days, and so we just kind of been supporting each other in that way. She's a super dope individual. She's actually really into a lot of the not just the geopolitics, but the spirituality side of what's going on in Northern Africa. And I think that there's um, a bit of a dark spot in terms of the general narrative that's out there as to what's happening there. So, considering the things that are going on today in Sudan, I wanted to bring on Nada and have a brief conversation about some of the things that are happening and maybe have happened and maybe will happen from your perspective. But before we get into all that, how are you today? Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I really, really appreciate it. Especially when there is so much turmoil at the moment now in Sudan and several other places on the continent. It's been quite difficult, so I'm glad that you hit me up and wanted to talk about this because it's really important. At the moment, there's not much really being shared about Sudan, or the knowledge is kind of, I think people's general knowledge about Sudan and the situation is that it's one of those countries that have constant turmoil and constant conflict, when that's really not the case. Since 1956, which was when Sudan gained independence from the Anglo-Egyptian, Anglo-Arab, they have had 3 revolutions since then, and they've had 5 military coups. So it's been very,
Wow.
very, very volatile. Since we're all in this inflation crisis at the moment, we feel it here in the UK, but in other countries, it's a whole different ballgame, in terms of what's happening to our economies. And at the moment we have the RSF and the Sudan army forces that are clashing at the moment.
Yeah.
And this is nothing to do with the people of Sudan. This is just a fight for power and civilians.
There's two military divisions, isn't it? Because you have like the Sudan military, and then you said it's the RSF, right? So I
Yeah.
think they how did they kind of come into the play or come into the fray?
So in December, just gone, there was an agreement of democracy. The president at the time had stepped down, and the country has just been waiting on to see what the outcome was going to be. The decision for that was going to be on the 11th of April, and then there was conflicts between the RSF and the Sudan army, the Sudan military, of the delays of this and etc. Now, I know, you know, um, we don't like to really speculate, but the facts are also the facts. At the moment, the RSF is being funded by Russia's, weaponry and military equipment, and they also own, well, they manage all of the mining regions in Sudan. So Sudan is abundantly rich in gold and in
Yeah.
cobalt, which, when you're looking at the situation in the world today, these minerals are in high demand since we are entering this technology age, and it's in all of our phones, it's in all of our technology that we need these minerals. So these countries like Congo and Sudan and other places are being heavily, heavily, heavily exploited, while the world just thinks, so it's just another African country with turmoil, but the actual citizens, civilians, they just want food and water. That's literally all the people want of Sudan. But it's just constant fight for our resources as always, and the people end up suffering.
Wow. Wow.
So
That's a really good point that Sudan is a rich country. I think sometimes we as you said, we place a lot of the developing nations in this box that we say, oh, they just need to get their stuff together. But the reality is, the cash that we used, it's all invented. We created that out of thin air. The actual value that people are trading this for is the stuff that is in the ground, the human resources that are above the ground, the actual intellectual resources that we're, pulling people out and putting them in different places. I think that it's important to also recognize that when we talk about the issues of a country, we can't divorce that from the causes of it. And when we try to pretend that there is something that's like a thing out there and that we have nothing to do with it, and when I say we, I mean the whole Western world, it's like an abdication of our responsibility to our fellow man, because um, that is part of what it means to be, a cohesive a community, a collection, a culture. We have to be able to support each other. And I think it's really, really important that you're bringing light to this. Another way that I described you is as an advocate and as a teacher. If you want to follow along with some of what she posts, you can find her on Instagram at Daughter of the Nile. Her focus, as I said before, is largely on some of the issues impacting the wider diaspora, obviously, but more specifically, a lot of the Northern African cultures. So we talked a little bit about what goes on in Sudan. How does that sort of overlap with what your work is? And maybe you can describe some of the stuff you do in terms of whether it's advocacy, teaching, or just kind of being there for folks.
I think my advocacy kind of started throughout my spiritual discovery, spiritual journey. I have always been an advocate in many different aspects, especially in terms of environmental. And I find my source, my spirit, the divine within nature and the cosmos and people and the things that we see around us. And it's for me, as someone of diaspora and have lived in the UK for so long, and then obviously traveling to Africa, which is something that I recommend every single person of diaspora to do, to connect with the motherland.
I back that.
It brings you a completely different perspective spiritually. Your mindset, your motivation, everything is changed because we're so fortunate to kind of have all this information around us, but a lot of us are not using it to our advantage. And I want to be able to continue to teach myself and teach others, because that saying, each one teach one, is so powerful, because you might think that you might not know anything, but what you know, someone else might not have a clue. So it's so
Absolutely.
important that we do have these platforms and we do have the power to reach people, that it's not just aesthetically pleasing pictures or like, do you, but it has to be a way to educate and
Facts.
add to the collective consciousness.
Mm.
And when I kind of connect with the motherland and connect with back home, like, you see the spirit of the people, but sometimes they might not have the same wide range of knowledge that we have access to. So my focus is really the people of the continent, but also to kind of inspire and be that kind of example to make sure that we're all learning about ourselves and knowing who we are and continuing to dive into.
Yeah, that's important to know thyself, right? I think it's a cool sort of exchange that can happen too. You mentioned the spirit of the people in Africa. Um, and oftentimes I'll see videos where like you'll have, kids that have no shoes, walking around in dust, but they're happy, dancing, they're enjoying life. Meanwhile, you have people who have, 6 figures, 7 figures, 8 figures in their bank account, and they're contemplating suicide today because they can't deal with the demons or the monsters in their own lives. And I think that this is a perfect opportunity. We can maybe offload some of that material wealth to the motherland, and then they can maybe offload some of that spirit to the Western world. It could be a fair trade. Maybe we could
Yeah.
figure out something. But right now, I feel like we're still at this weird impasse. Um, so hopefully, as we continue to learn, as we continue to grow, we can get closer to that ideal of recognizing that we are all one, and we can figure this thing out. Um, one of the things I just noticed too, you're wearing an Ankh necklace. It's really pretty. So Personally, I'm a Christian, but I deeply respect people of all walks and all faiths because I feel like in this day and age, especially with ideologies like atheism on the rise, I feel like it's very important for people to stay connected to the creator, however they conceive of it. And so I just wanted to ask you, what is your, like, how do you interpret that symbol? What does that mean to you? Like, what is that, like, what is the power that it has for you?
This symbol, there's so many layers to this symbol, but the most known symbol, the most known meaning of this symbol is the balance of the masculine and the feminine
Mm,
energy and the child. So because it looks so much like the
hmm.
cross of Christianity, it is believed that this is the original version of the cross. But um, as it depicts, the feminine energy, the feminine principle. And the reason why I love this symbol, and it's probably one of the most important symbols for me, is because I see that unbalance in many Abrahamic religions and societies today. The actual embodiment of the feminine energy, the feminine principle is very much
Yeah.
missing. So this is kind of the foundation of all African spiritual practices in terms of making sure
It's
that
like
the
a
feminine and
counterbalance to
the
the
masculine
over, yeah.
energies are balanced. You see that in all African spiritual practices. So
Oh
this
no, I think we
is
lost her.
why I feel like it's very, very important. It can also mean eternal life. Obviously, the masculine, feminine, and the child. It could mean the foundation, the roots, and the cosmos. It can mean water, because water is everything that we need. We can't breathe without water. Water is in our atmosphere. Water is in every aspect of what we need to sustain our life. Um,
Man, lost you for a second there.
yeah.
Apologize for that. We'll have to stitch the two clips together. But continue on. You were talking about kind of the counterbalance of the feminine energy with the
Yeah.
masculine.
And it's even I can go on for days about this symbol here, because it really is the root of a lot of spiritual practices. Even when you think about the yin and yang, that's the balance of the dark and the light, the feminine and the masculine, the up and down. And this is everything that is needed for our own spiritual growth and to create harmony within the collective. And until we can find this balance and find this duality
Mm,
within us and around us, that will be the true kind of upliftment of society. And yeah, so that's what I mean.
beautiful. Thank you for the explanation. Yeah, definitely give me some food for thought for later. Um, I didn't have too many other questions for you today. I think we kind of got into a lot of the meat of what's going on. If you guys haven't already checked out her Instagram, go ahead and do that. Is there anywhere that they can donate or support what your work you're doing right now?
Yes. So I have a personal fundraiser, which is investing in the Nubian communities. That is in the link in my bio on my Instagram. But however, at the moment, there obviously is the situation in Sudan. So I definitely recommend following at Sudan on Instagram, and they have various sources and links that you can go to and contribute and share and uplift Sudanese voices and really donate if that's possible, because really it's that would be sharing our voices is probably one of the most important things right now globally.
Absolutely. And any kind of final words, whether encouragement, whether reproach, or maybe something in the middle where you can just give the folks a bit of insight into whether it's stuff you're doing or things that you feel like we could all be doing a little bit better.
That's a really good question. I think the most important thing is that what we were saying about know thyself. For me, I have found so much more connection to the divine, my higher self, in diving into things that I'm being called to dive into. and we allow ourselves sometimes to be distracted by other things. But something I've learned in my journey is that eventually I look back and I think about, oh, I should have done this earlier, I should have done this earlier, I should have learned about this earlier. So if you feel called to dive into something, whether it's a passion, whether it's a creative, whether it's, reading, or, just having an experience, don't hold back on it, and make sure you're diving into it, because that is the divine speaking to you in those ways.
What bar? I think that's a perfect way to finish this one. Thank you so much once again, Nada, for joining me today on this here Untitled podcast. Hopefully we can chop again soon. Maybe we'll have some better news in the future. But as it stands right now, I feel like the work is before us and it's still an opportunity. And so as we kind of join hands, join ranks, and begin to figure out how we can move into a better future, I hope that you, the viewer, joins us as we continue to try to fight the power, but also fight ourselves and win. And, we want to become better versions of ourselves. We want to become better versions of society. And the way we do that is by, sharing these ideas, continuing to connect with each other. So once again, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.